Welcome to the Rhythms of Discipleship podcast with Jon Cobler, where we help you become disciples who make disciples that live in the Five Rhythms. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Let's get into today's episode.
Welcome, everybody. We got another episode of the Rhythms of Discipleship podcast.
Here we are.
And my name is Chase. I'm here with Cody, and I'm here with Pastor Jon. Welcome to another episode here. This is all about unpacking the five rhythms of discipleship, where we're trying to help you become disciples who make disciples who live in the five rhythms. And today we're unpacking rhythm number 3, which is authentic relationships.
Yeah, Can I say something about that real quick?
Yeah.
I think somebody might say, oh, it's another thing. Why is this important?
Right.
I would say that nowhere did Jesus ever ask you to be a Christian. He did ask you to be a disciple.
Right.
And if you can't define what that looks like, and you could say, well, it's following Jesus, but how are you actually going to develop that in your life? That's discipleship. And if we're not being discipled and discipling others, we're missing out on the most important things that Jesus said make for a life of abundance and meaning and purpose. So really, these are 5 rhythms to make a life filled with meaning, purpose, intention, legacy.
Right.
And if you don't have the understanding of what it really means to be a disciple, we're helping you do that in a way that you don't have to be an expert. It's for everybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing I wanted to key in on is, for years when you were talking about this, it's, when the conversation of discipleship comes up, it's always this thing that is like high up on the top of the cookie shelf.
Yeah.
And it's pastors or preachers or traveling evangelists or like people that have been following Jesus for 60 years, they have access to this thing called discipleship.
Right.
And it's way up here, and you got to read all the books. You got to attend church for years and years and years. You got to do all the right things in order to be called a disciple or to be growing in discipleship. And the 5 rhythms takes it from off that shelf and says, nope, it's super accessible. You've been following Jesus for one day. You are a disciple, and this is the way you can figure out to be growing in it.
Absolutely. And the people who are most susceptible to maybe blow past this are the people who've been coming to church the longest.
Absolutely.
Not to be critical, because I'm one of them, but to have the idea that, well, I've been discipled. Like, I've been to church for so many years, so I've been discipled. Man, discipleship is this adventure and journey that never ends. And the fruit of discipleship is not you are well discipled, it's who are your disciples that are following Jesus more passionately because of how you've imparted life to them. Yeah. So, man, I hope people get that and get excited about the legacy and the purpose and even the way that these principles translate to a life more well-lived when they go to work, when they go to school, when they're playing sports. It's across the board because it's the stuff that's deep down inside you.
Yep. So if you arrived here today and you're watching this, like the first episode you're watching or listening to, make sure you go back to the first couple. We've got, this is episode 4. We've got an intro kind of unpacking kind of the bigger picture, and then the first 2, inside out change and naturally supernatural. Go back and make sure you listen to those to kind of be brought up to where we are today, which is authentic relationships.
Yeah,
so
authentic
Cody,
relationships.
Kind of take us into it.
Yeah. So Pastor Jon, I'm gonna read the definition that we've kind of come up with for this, and then what like we have on previous episodes, let's just unpack certain pieces of that are really really poignant to really unpack what authentic relationships is all about. So the definition we got working with here is, I have meaningful relationships where I know people and they know me. I share life with people and stay with them, even when it costs me to do so. They do the same for me. We make each other better, and together we are blessed and empowered. Mm-hmm. So when you hear that, when you see that definition, what are the pieces of that you're like, man, this whole that whole definition is important, but what are some of the key places in there where you're like, we should drill down on that to really get a good understanding of what authentic relationships is all about? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think what does it mean to share life? And how do you have authentic relationships, meaningful relationships, when you can be guaranteed that you're not always going to agree and get along? And why is that actually a better thing for the kind of relationships you actually want to have in life?
Yeah.
That produce, and we use the word blessed, but that really has to do with joy. Yeah. Blessed is overwhelming joy. So authentic relationships produce overwhelming joy when we live them out well.
Yeah. Talk to me about the in here when it talks about it costs me to do so. Like the word cost with relationships. I think convenient relationships or cheap relationships or convenient relationships or one-sided relationships are really prevalent nowadays.
Yeah.
It's, in the microwave culture, we want the Amazon, like the Amazon Prime. What we want it now. We want it faster, and we want it to cost us less and less and less. When it comes to building authentic relationships with anyone in our life, talk to us about the real cost that's involved with that personally to have that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a relationship that means a lot, that's lasted a long time, that hasn't had to endure pain. And it's not uncommon for that pain to be caused by the other person or the other person's response to something I've caused.
Yeah.
And I used to think, how can I avoid that? And the longer I live, the more I realize that is par for the course. Because we, as human beings that are frail and broken, if we're going to commit to one another, we're bringing with us all of that brokenness. And if I trust you to see who I really am, some of those sharp edges are going to affect you.
Yeah.
And your response to that tells me everything about the way you love me.
Yeah.
And so I think that learning to navigate conflict in whether it's a marriage or a friendship is really one of the most important ways to a more connected relationship.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say that vulnerability, which is a fundamental ingredient in meaningful relationships, is basically saying, let's dance together with swords in our hands. This idea that I'm going to let you so close to me
Right.
and yet recognize you could stab me at any minute.
Yeah.
But that's actually what creates the most meaningful relationships that we long for.
Yeah. So how does somebody navigate whether it be pain or disappointment in relationships? Because, first of all, that should be super encouraging to everybody to know that if you're experiencing pain or disappointment in relationships, like, you're not weird,
Right.
or that relationship is not inherently broken.
Right.
That's just a part of the process of being and growing in a relationship. But a lot of people can get really hung up right there, whether it be because they don't have people speaking wisdom into their life, they don't have the life experience, or maybe it's a lack of maturity on their end. But how do people get past pain and disappointment in a healthy way, whether it's with their spouse, whether it's with their friends, whoever it's with? How do they, because really this gets into a maturity conversation. Like, how can people mature into getting past the barrier so that they can experience authentic relationships? Because it seems like that would be a really big roadblock where people would just throw their hands in the air and say, forget it, I'm done, like, I'm out, because this hurts a little too much. But if they press past that, they can really experience this. How does someone do that?
Well, first of all, I would say let's remember that not all pain makes a relationship better. When there's abuse,
Right.
that kind of pain isn't making the relationship better.
Yep.
Now, Jesus will use any pain that you've experienced to and heal you and restore you and strengthen you. But the reality is there is some pain that comes in relationship that will never make the relationship better because there's a narcissistic person involved that is impervious. They're not going to open up, so they're just going to produce pain. So we're not talking about that.
Yep.
But what we are talking about is the kind of pain that comes in every relationship when there's disagreement, when there's a temper, when somebody is imperfect and that imperfection comes out. How do we learn to handle that and make the most of that? In the biggest picture, we learn to be like Jesus. Because Jesus demonstrated who he was and the way to love from Gethsemane to Calvary.
Yeah.
From the Garden of Gethsemane, when his disciples kept falling asleep on him, to his betrayal by one of his own disciples, to the abuse he suffered. And what did he do along the way? All the way to the cross. What did he do? He healed the he healed the soldier, right?
Yeah,
That Peter
right.
chopped his ear off. He made sure that his mother was going to be taken care of.
Right.
When he was before Pilate, he didn't spew venom. He was only concerned about what the Father was doing. So Jesus is the perfect example of somebody who is so loved and connected to the Father that they don't stop acting like themselves even when people don't treat them well.
Right.
And so what we talk about is inside out change. That's where God's identity. Like, I remember times where people have teased me or made fun of me or belittled me.
People made fun of you?
Oh, people who don't have respect for the beard. They don't understand.
How could anyone insult
They don't
you?
understand
geez.
monochromic color.
Monochromic? Yes.
Those people.
Yes.
Those people.
But part of what I learned to think about in moments like that are, number one, is God still love me, and is his love greater than their opinion of me?
Yeah.
I
Right.
think about my family. I think about my friends. And there's something that's so uplifting to put the criticism in its appropriate place, because my identity is not shaped by the critics and the crowd. It's shaped first by my Father and then by my tribe. And so, again, why is authentic relationship important? Because developing those relationships, they're going to be the people around you that call you to that who God's love for you and their love for you because of his love for you.
Right.
And that's powerful.
So powerful. And it's so easy to forget that. You have to have other people help you remember that, who you are.
Absolutely.
Connected to the Father. Most people listening would agree with the sentiment, like, I want authentic relationships. I don't think there would be a lot of people that would say, like, I don't want this. But there are things that get in the way. What are a few things that come to your mind that get in the way, or maybe excuses that people bring to the table, whether they actually say them or they're underneath the surface, that prevent people from actually having what we're talking about?
When we make our connection points with people our preferences, like we hang because we like the Seahawks, or this is our sports thing, or I like their sense of humor. When we connect, and I'm going to call those shallow.
Sure.
When we connect with people at a shallow level, preferences, when those preferences change, it's the natural thing is to eject from the relationship.
Right.
Listen, that's why I'll give you something, most relationships that start with people living together and having sex only last 2 to 3 years, because that physical connection is such an attraction that it will keep you together for that long.
Yeah.
But the problem is you're more than a physical experience. Your mind, will, emotion start to catch up, and that experience that feels good can't last more than a couple years.
Yeah.
So Seahawks, which is a pretty strong, it's up there for, godliness.
Pacific Northwest people, at least.
Well, yeah, because
Or just people that love Jesus and love to see victory. And
West is the
those guys.
best. We know this. That's all true. So when we
that's good.
our preferences, like that'll kill us, man. So what we have to look for is, I think, what I would call thicker relationships, thicker reasons. I want to be around people whose loves I want to emulate.
Say that one more time.
I want to be around people whose loves I want to emulate. And so if it's just for pasta or the Seahawks, that's not significant enough for me.
Yeah.
I want people that love Jesus, that love the things that the Father loves. When I'm around those people, they inspire me to love well. And then when conflict and difficulty comes, there's something bigger for me to say it's worth sticking around and working through this rather than ejecting from it.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest hindrances or excuses that people give as well that prevent this stuff from happening is time. That could be, unpacked with intentionality. They don't have an intentional approach at pursuing it. We've talked about this before, and maybe you can unpack this a little bit too, because this is a valuable piece. I think some people's personalities will hear all this and they're people. They like to, care for people. Maybe they even struggle with people pleasing or letting people down. And so there can be this tension of like, how do I have authentic relationships with everybody? I don't have time for everybody. And so there's almost everyone gets the shallow relationship because they're trying to meet some degree of expectation for everybody. But we know you can't necessarily accomplish authentic relationship with everybody. Can you unpack that a little bit for people that are like, how do I do this? Maybe help relieve maybe a
Yeah.
tension that they're wrestling with.
Well, first of all, this is such an American problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we
So
want
true.
big, fast, and easy.
Right.
Yep.
It's really not a human problem.
Right.
There are plenty of places where tribe and family are so important that the idea of leaving or moving is never on the table.
Right.
So I think that's part of it. And Jesus is all about this. I want to, one of the last things that Jesus prayed in John 17 is that those who will believe in me through their word, he's talking about the disciples, that they may be one just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The ultimate authentic relationships are people who are united together because they've been united to the Father. Right? That is the ultimate. And for people who don't have time or don't know where to start, those are legitimate challenges. But if you see how worth it is,
Yep.
then it becomes the kind of priority that will make room. But it isn't going to happen quick or
Yeah.
easy. I would say you probably don't know that this is going to be an authentic relationship for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. 100%.
And if you look around and you don't have in relationships that you've been investing in for 2 or 3 years, then the best time to start is 3 years ago.
Or
The
right
next
now.
best time is right now.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in the most simple terms possible, tell us, like, so we just spent, I don't know, 15 minutes
Yeah.
talking about what these relationships look like and all of those things. But at the end of the day, how do these make us better disciples that can make disciples? Like, how do all those puzzle pieces fit together to be like, this makes me more like Jesus. This makes me more of a disciple who makes disciples. How does that all work together?
Well, I don't know if we know that in its entirety, but we know that Jesus used this description, the body of Christ. And he talked about arms and legs, and he talked about elders and deacons, and he talked about apostles, prophets, teachers, evangelists. The bottom line is, he over and over again, he talked about how it is interdependence that reflects the image of God.
Yeah.
In the same way that the Father, Son, and the Spirit are distinct and yet interdependent, as people created in the image of God, you will not reflect the image of God in isolation.
Right.
Yeah.
Not in the same way that you will when you are in authentic relationships.
Yep.
So part of the reason it's better is because it's a better reflection of someone who is living in the image of God. It is certainly a reflection of somebody who's a part of the church. And practically, it's a humble recognition that I have blind spots.
Yeah. Big
Yeah.
time.
Right? Like right now, I can see things that Chase can't see because I can see behind him, and he can see things that I can't see.
Right.
To say I don't need that is sheer arrogance.
Yeah.
And if I put people around me that are looking for the same things
Right.
but have different perspectives, oh man, I have such a better opportunity to avoid some of the unnecessary pain and grasp some of the opportunity I would have otherwise missed.
Yeah. I was just on the phone. I was talking to you about this yesterday with a guy who over the past 3-4 years, I have built authentic relationship with. Used to live really close to him. Now we haven't, but we text back and forth all the time. Making a big decision, and everybody that's, been in my life more or less for 6 months to a year, that's kind of been close, and they might become authentic relationships eventually. They were, every single one of them. I mean, there's a dozen people telling me this one direction. They're like, yep, that's the direction to go. And I got on the phone with this other guy that, I've been building a relationship with years, and he was like, they're all wrong.
Wow.
Like, I don't think that's right for X, Y, and Z reason. You do this instead. And the weight that I gave his opinion because of the depth of relationship, and then also zooming out from it, he was able to see things that those other people that have only known me for 6 months to a year, they had no idea about how I've made decisions in the past. My family, the depth of knowing my family. And so they were able to see so much more and see so much more perspective to be like, that is not the right choice. This one is probably
really
the best
good.
one for you. And he brought up blind spots that nobody else could have seen because of the depth of relationship that we've built together over the years. So I just think that piece is so huge, because that really does help you follow Jesus closer.
Yeah,
it absolutely
it's
does.
good. One thing that people are often disappointed in, I mean, I live in the church world, so I think about that perspective. People are often disappointed because they come to church and after 6 months or a year, they don't have great friends.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And they think, well, church is all about community, so why haven't I found any? And I would say that in the best of circumstances, the best a church organization can do is throw pieces of kindling together on the ground.
Yeah.
But you have to be the spark.
Yeah.
Jesus fans the flame. I mean, we could take it all the way.
Yeah.
But nobody else can be the spark that lights a flame that
Right.
makes something into a fire.
Right.
And so if you attend a class, or if you go to church, or if you're serving on a team and you're frustrated because that's not producing authentic relationships, take a step back and say, God, what's the spark that I need to bring so that something more can come out of these relationships?
Yeah. Yep. This might be going, because I know we're getting close to wrapping up.
Yep.
This might be going more to the practical, some steps to the developing the things that we're talking about. But one of the things that if someone were like, hey, so what do I do now? Like right now, you just gave a great action step. Take a step back and ask the Lord, if you're not experiencing authentic relationships like to the degree that you want to, take a step back, ask the Lord to reveal to you some of those spaces and places that you can step in. Another thing like that I would contribute to that is taking a faith step towards two things that you can do. One being the people that are in your life that you do have the potential of authentic relationships with, right? So you've already got some kind of foundation of relationship with. Two things. One, the vulnerability piece, taking an intentional step of bringing somebody into a place that is vulnerable, a struggle, a weakness, a pain point. Something that somebody doesn't know that, man, if them knowing will help them get to know you more and what you're walking through currently and where you're wanting to go, where you've been through. So taking an intentional step of vulnerable, inviting in. And then the second one would be like asking somebody to be honest about places in your life where, man, God could do some work, or some blind spots like you mentioned earlier. Because when I look at my authentic relationships in my life, those two things are key components to the ongoing production and development of those authentic relationships. It's the vulnerability piece of letting people in, and then it's the invitation to them to seeing things and to saying things to me out of that place of love. And so just on a real practical level, those are kind of two things I would give. Is there practical things from your seats with the authentic relationships that you have that you would say, man, this is a good step for somebody?
Tacos. Bro, I'm telling you. And well, it goes to this whole, like, the best, some people can do, like, is arrange kindling, right?
Yeah.
And I think our family does tacos like 2 nights a week. You got invited the other night and didn't come. Whatever.
Listen,
I knew it was late. It was last
we're
notice.
not on
It was
authentic
late.
relationships yet, so we're gonna.
Yeah. But I mean, seriously though, I think sometimes we go into building authentic relationships, or the idea of it, and like instantly we start thinking about like the depth of relationship, depth of conversation, vulnerability, all these things. Those are all really scary. You know what's not scary? A taco. But all of those things, after, hey, you've been over here 3-4 nights having tacos over the past couple months, and the consistent time put in. Tim Wimberly, one of the things he taught me years ago, it's small deposits over time that add up to great relationships.
Right.
And it's not always like, grabbing a cup of Starbucks with someone you don't know and be like, we're about to get vulnerable right now.
Right.
That's weird. But if you just invite somebody over and say, hey, we're going to have some tacos and hang out, play like some Phase 10, and don't play Phase 10 if you want to build your relationships. That'll ruin
Competition.
them. That'll ruin them. But
No, that's good.
To me, that's for us and our family, that's how we do it. It's like inviting people over for tacos, driving up into the forest and having a fire with them, doing things that provide the atmosphere where that can eventually be developed.
You're right. 100%. I have a group of people in my mind for my life where they have had a lot of taco nights, but they haven't had any real conversations.
100%.
So that's where I'd say there's a tension between the spectrum of 100% what you said. And my challenge to the people that have been like cool, you've watched some Seahawks games together, you've had some incredible taco nights, but maybe it's time to take that step of a deeper level of conversation and inviting some, because it is scary. You're right. You nailed it. It is intimidating. It is scary. But I would propose you can't have authentic relationships until you get to the other side of that and developing that. So I think to hit a couple of the spectrums of people listening, you got the people that need to just, save the in-depth, this is what you're struggling with combo for a different time. Go have some tacos. Yeah. And then those that need to actually take a step of faith and swallow some pride or overcome some fear, like invite somebody into a place that they haven't.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? So
and expectations are the enemy of authenticity.
Absolutely.
Oof.
Right? In other words, if I'm always expecting something of you, and if you don't give me what I want, then I'm going to keep you at a distance. It's going to, whether it's physically or non-verbally, communicate to you that I just want something from you.
Yeah.
And that crushes authenticity.
Yep.
So 1, examine your expectations. 2, risks are what fuel next level vulnerability. In other words, somebody has to take a risk, because vulnerability means you could hurt me with this. It's foolish to go all in with somebody you don't have reason to trust, but you start with tacos, and then you find ways to take appropriate risks to let people into your life. Yeah. And you judge by their response. If people freak out when you say, man, I've been struggling with this, will you pray for me? And they can't handle it, that they may not be at a place where you can go to that authentic relationship. Yep. And by the way, fear, shame, and control. Fear, shame, and control. When those things are in the midst of how you're responding to somebody, fear, shame, and control. I'm afraid of what you're going to think. I'm ashamed of who I am. I'm only going to be open if I can control the outcome. Those will crush. Yeah. Right? So you have to take a risk. If those things are present, a risk to go beyond that. And one of the things helpful for me is being around people who have authentic relationships and watching how they relate and asking questions. Because the thought that it all happens naturally and easily, let's just throw that away and say, let's be intentional to learn how to do authentic relationship.
Yeah. So good. One last thing for the person that feels hesitant because there's been wounds or hurt, right? I think about the person that's like, the last time I was in an authentic relationship or a community, man, something broke. There was a betrayal. There was some kind of hurt that's caused some deep pain that's made it really difficult for me to step out, like we're talking about. Any just last kind of wrap up moment, encouragement you'd give for that person that's has experienced that kind of pain and feels hesitant about that kind of step into an authentic relationship or authentic relationships again?
I think there's a reason why almost every letter in the New Testament deals with broken relationships. It's about forgiveness. It's about gossip. It's about service. Of course, it's about Jesus, but then most of the practical things that are being addressed in the New Testament are issues between people. So if you find yourself in that place, take heart that you're one of us. Like, you are the church. Right. And part of the church is recognizing its brokenness and its desperate need for Jesus. So what I would say to you is keep pressing hard after Jesus, because the more that you follow him and love him, the more you're going to be compelled to love other people that are following him. And that's going to fuel your desire to want to be in deeper relationship with them. So start with Jesus and let the work that he's doing overflow into how you think and feel about the people around you. I think about 1 John 1:7. If we walk in the light as he is in the light, what's it mean? Walk where Jesus is walking. Then we have fellowship with one another and the forgiveness of sins. So it's all right there. It can be a scary thing to come out of the shadows when you've been hurt, when you've been disappointed. But Jesus is walking in the light and he wants you there with him. And when you do, you're going to see other people that are worth making that investment.
So good. Well, there we go. Thanks for joining us today. Stay tuned for the next episode. of the Rhythms of Discipleship podcast, where we are all about helping you become disciples who make disciples who live in the 5 rhythms.
Yes, sir.
Until next time.
See ya.